Hey class, this week we're covering Module 3, and I just want to go through and show you folks what we have in it. There's a lot more stuff this week than there was last week. That's what I want to do from now on, and so we'll see how this goes. So first of all, you've got another weekly check-in, and I want you folks to do this on a weekly basis just so we're talking and finding out. It helps me know where you folks are and what you're doing. Then also, we're going to have our two lectures, which is structure and character. I'll get into those in a second. There's a discussion for favorite character, and then also a character sheet and a character sheet Dropbox. So that is going to be our next assignment, and I'm going to talk about that as I get into this lecture. Okay. And then also remember this week, your first script installment is due, so that goes up here in Module 2 in the first writing Dropbox. Hopefully you folks have already done that. If not, the deadline is at midnight tonight, so keep writing on those if you're not done, but that's where it's going to go. So let's talk about structure. So we're going to be talking about structure a bit, and I just want to give you folks an introduction and a broad overview, and then there's one specific topic we want to start with, and we're going to be talking about that in more detail next week, and that's where we're going to kind of hit the ground running with structure, jumping into a script. So scripts are formulaic. That's a good thing. Okay, you can try to break the formula, but it's a good thing to know what the formula is in the first place, because the average moviegoer has expectations. I know I do. I'm not an average moviegoer because I tend to analyze stuff a little bit more, but if I go in, I have expectations, and those expectations need to be met in order for me to be fully entertained. And I go to a movie expecting to be entertained. So things need to happen at certain points in the film. Rising action, resolutions need to satisfy in the proper dosages and rhythms, and all of this starts with the script. So if the script doesn't have the correct structure, then say goodbye to viewer satisfaction and your writing career. You can write that great scripture-defying or structure-defying script later on in your career, but for right now, you got to write something formulaic in order to satisfy me, your instructor, and potentially your readers. Okay, so a script normally looks like this, and this is a Sid Field diagram, one of the oldest ones around, and it pretty much has everything in it we need. We've got the 3 acts: Act 1, the setup; Act 2, the confrontation; and Act 3 is the resolution. And it kind of shows your line down here and where the plot points fall through. The place where I kind of differ with Sid Field on these is he has plot point 1, plot point 2. You know, you can't really number plot points, in my opinion, because you're going to have tons of plot points. The more plot points you have in a script, the better it's going to be. So, in my opinion, you're going to have like 5 plot points in Act 1. You're going to have 10 plot points in Act 2 and another 5 in Act 3. There's not going to be just 2 plot points there. And here it is with page numbers. Some people really like to have those because they like to have an idea where things are going to happen. We have Act 1, pages 1 through 30. That's the setup. Plot point 1, or what I call Act 1 turn, is going to be somewhere within 25 to 27, but probably around page 30 there. And then we jump into Act 2, pages 30 to 90, and then Act 3, pages 90 to 120. And then they have other ones, what he calls the pinch. These are more plot points, points that are very important to the script. We'll talk a little bit more about plot points later on. And then here's a final example with action and emotion levels. So we have Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 here. And then we have a graph that shows the important parts of that. So starting at the beginning, we start with normal life, or as I like to call it, equilibrium. Then you have an inciting incident, which is our topic for this week. Then you have your first turning point, midpoint, second turning point, your low point of it, climax, resolution, and then the denouement, which is the cooling off point at the end, where they put medals on everybody and the Wookiees raise their arms and go make Wookiee sounds. So that's our working model for this particular lesson because it includes the inciting incident. And the inciting incident is the first really important plot point we're going to have in our script. It's prior to this, you have equilibrium, so you have normal life. It has to be established. Life goes on normally and characters do what they do. And then something shatters that equilibrium. That something is the inciting incident, which has been jokingly referred to as the exciting incident, because very often that inciting incident is going to be something exciting. So where does that happen? That could vary on the script length and genre. In a short film, the inciting incident can be at the very beginning in order to save time and get things rolling. I've definitely done that in films before, where the very first scene, character walks in, boom, that's the inciting incident right there, just because of the fact that it was cheaper to shoot it that way. In a horror film, on the other hand, it could take 45 minutes or more to show up due to things like low budgets, as I said before, suspense. You want to lead the audience along, get them to where they're ready to be scared, and also incompetence. Horror films tend to be something that people make where they kind of wing things a little bit, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You definitely have some structure breaking things going on in a lot of horror films because of this, and that can cause the film to suffer in some cases. Sometimes it can make it work better. You never know. Most of the time, though, the inciting incident will hit within the first 15 to 20 minutes, or in writer speak, 15 to 20 pages. There's pretty much a one-to-one relationship depending on the kind of writer you are. The trick is you want to establish enough equilibrium in order to have something to change, but you don't want to spend so long establishing it that you lose your audience/reader. So you have to have something there, some sort of normal life that you establish a little bit of, and then you want to just shatter that like a pane of cheap-ass candy glass, okay? And then that's the inciting incident that does that. So some examples. In a rom-com, it's usually the point where the two protagonists and future lovers probably, they meet for the first time, but for whatever reason, they cannot be together, and so the rest of the film they're spending trying to get together. But it's that first meeting that is the inciting incident, because at that point their lives have changed. In an adventure, it's when the kids discover the disappearance of a relative who leaves some sort of clue, that point where, oh, grandpa's gone and he left a map. In an action adventure, it's when the protagonist's family is kidnapped, and of course he tells the kidnapper he's going to use his specific set of skills to find that person and kill them. That's the point where, once again, equilibrium has changed, the family has been kidnapped, and then the rest of that becomes a chase to try to get the family back. In a sci-fi film, it's when there's the scientific problem presents itself, whatever that may be, and it's going to require the scientists to solve it. And that can be asteroids, aliens, the space-time continuum. They got to fly through space. If it's a dystopian sci-fi film, equilibrium has already been shattered completely, and then it's an attempt to kind of find some new sense of order that goes through there. So it's almost like it's working backwards in that case. In a fantasy film, it's where the would-be protagonist discovers a ring or a sword or a princess who needs to be either rescued or destroyed. I'm lumping all these together. Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, they all follow this kind of formula where you have to find something or realize that something is important, and then, oh my God, things will never be the same, and you have to go on this adventure. In a revenge drama, it's the point where the protagonist loses his family and then has to change irreparably to the point where he's going to be a revenge hero or an anti-hero at that point. But you have to establish that the family is alive before you kill them. And then in Home Alone, it's where the point where Kevin gets left at home. Although that's kind of an interesting film in that respect, because Kevin's reaction is very different from his parents' reaction. So his parents' reaction are a little bit further down the road, and it's like, oh my God, we left him at home. Meanwhile, Kevin's like, oh wow, my parents left me at home. This is awesome. So there you go. So these are all examples of inciting incidences. It needs to be something big, something important, okay? Now, our next topic is character. And character is another one of the big main building blocks you have to start with in your script. If you don't have good characters, you can kiss your good script goodbye. Okay, it has to be built on a solid foundation of these good characters, because otherwise, whose story are we following here? Okay, so this requires additional front-end work and research, and this is really important, and it will really be beneficial to you down the road. To determine what a character is going to do, you need to determine why they're doing this. So childhood traumas, defining adolescent experiences, adulthood successes and failures. You have to know all these things before your character steps foot into your story. So think about it this way: before your story even started, your character had an entire life. And then when that inciting incident happens, once again, everything changes. But you need to know what this is, and you need to write it down before you write the script. And I'll give you a little hint. One of the reasons you want to do this is because if you don't, very often you will start your script too early. You'll start it before your story actually starts because you're busy writing the backstory of this character. If you establish, at least in your own mind, what the character's backstory is, it's easier for you to tell where the real story begins. So a character sheet is what I have for you folks to fill out. This is an example of a blank one that I'm providing for you. And then here is one that has been filled out for possibly one of the nastiest characters I've ever created, Tommy Bricola, a character with absolutely no redeeming qualities whatsoever, which is not the kind of character you want to build a script around. You want to have some characters that actually do have redeeming qualities. Even if they're terrible, terrible people, you still want to have some element of humanity. Tommy Bricola has absolutely none of these things. But it was an interesting character study. And the script I put him in, which I will never, ever show you, is a kind of a good workout of this terrible, terrible character doing terrible, terrible things. But he couldn't have done those things if I had not come up with a character sheet to begin with. So it begins as a blank slate, but it should end up being like this, where you've filled out all of these details and you have a good idea of who this character is. And one of the places you want to start is you want to give your character a name. And this is really important for a few different reasons. And many writers, as you will have a hard time choosing a good name when you write. But don't let that stop you. Okay, so good names can be, but don't have to be, hard to come up with. And there's some tools and tips I can give you folks later on. Don't worry about the name right now. But that doesn't mean you need to have your character be man number one or unknown woman in your script because you don't know what the character's name is. Come up with a proxy name, Robert Smith or Jennifer Jones. Or I was driving today and I went through the towns of Tracy and Stockton and I thought, wow, what a cool name, Tracy Stockton. That sounds like a high-powered attorney. Boom, we've got a name. Take two town names, put them together, instant, awesome name. There you go. Another point I want to make sure you folks know is that you don't have to wait for another character to address your character for you to use a name in a script. And you may be wondering what I'm talking about, but very often someone will begin their script and they're calling their character man number one because at no point has anyone given that character a name. It's just an unknown person. And then someone says, hey, Bob, and then suddenly that unknown man becomes Bob. Don't do that. Okay, so think about it this way. You are not student number one until I call you by name in class. You already have a name. You already have a life. Your identity is independent of my knowing it. Your characters are the same way. So that way, if you have a character and he has a name, his name is Bob, he will begin the script as Bob, even if no one else knows his name. He knows he's Bob. And that's important, okay? So have them start as Bob and be Bob for the rest of the script. If they have an alternate identity, we can cross that down the road. But Bob never has to be unknown man in your script and then suddenly change. That's really awkward. People do it all the time, and I want everyone to stop doing that, okay? Use Bob, and he'll always be that way because you filled out his character sheet. Bob needs a character sheet. Bob knows who he is. You know who Bob is. The reader will know who Bob is. And they will also understand that even though no one has used that character's name, that's just a label for that character to pin their, for you to work with. So there you go. So going back, what I want you folks to do in here, in Module 3, is I have provided you folks with a character sheet for you to do on your own. Pick one of the characters that's going to be in your script, or another character that you just have been thinking about, kicking around. Do a character sheet for that person, okay? And then here is your character sheet Dropbox, where you can either drop an attachment of this character sheet you filled out. You can load this in Google Docs if you want to do it that way, but try to get a PDF output of that like you do with your scripts. Drop it in this Dropbox. You can also do it on paper, write it down, and photograph it too. That'll work as well. I'm good with all that stuff. So that's what we're doing this week. Next week, your character sheet will be due, and we'll be talking a little bit more about character, a little bit more about structure.